Can I introduce you now to our next speaker? We're just about on time. So Sarah, it would be fantastic to hear your surviving the impossible, please. You're all live, I can hear you.
Am I up, yeah?
Yeah, you're there. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, I'm just getting organised here. Just bear with me 2 seconds, because I'm not a techie. Can you see me and some slides?
Yeah, can see you and some slides.
Okay, great. So, well, first of all, wow, wow, that was fantastic, and I'm so enjoying it. I'd like to say thanks for asking me to be part of this, and I'm still kind of reflecting on what we've just heard, actually, so I need to get my head into my space and try and follow that for you guys. We rise by lifting others. I love that. Wow. So I'm going to ask you to just take a breath and to sit back, and mine's a kind of it's a canter through a condensed version of my story. And Elliot asked me to do this at the beginning of the year. I did it in person to an audience from Women in Fish and Chips, and I must have done okay, because she's asked me to come back and do it again for you guys today, for you ladies today, so I'm delighted. And what I want you to do, just to kind of kick off, is to just try and kind of imagine a scenario. Put yourself into my shoes. I'm going to set a scene, and that is that back in 2004, I was living in central London, and I had a very well-paid job with lots of perks and benefits. I was working for a prestigious company with 3 royal warrants. The company was established in 1780, and I had a seat on the PLC board of this company. And as you can probably guess, I was the first woman ever in the company's history to have achieved that. I was also a trustee of on the board of our relevant trade association, and in my spare time I took part in Ironman triathlons. So one day I phoned my best friend and explained that I wanted to quit my fancy job and move nearly 500 miles north, which wasn't a kind of place we went very often, from trendy Shoreditch to a village in Highland Scotland called Tyndrum, with a population of just 125. I told my friend that I intended to buy a derelict little chef and turn it into a fish and chip cafe, despite the fact that I had no previous experience in the fish and chip trade. Then I asked her the question, well, what do you think of that? So in fact, there's just some pictures of, the early days of the cafe there. So once she'd kind of picked herself up off the floor, and she wasn't backwards in coming forwards, she just said, are you seriously, have you lost the plot? Are you insane? And she just went on, and then she finally stopped to draw breath, and I knew she was thinking. And she said, actually, I think you should do it. I know you're not really happy with what you're doing here. And all this stuff, it's just really a facade. I think you should do it. I think you'll make a great job of it. But I don't think it'll be that easy. Those were famous last words, I can assure you. And that's kind of how the adventure all started. It wasn't a random thing. There were reasons that we chose the location we chose, family reasons and personal reasons. But my story is a story of resilience. That's pretty topical right now in what we're all facing with COVID. But my resilience is physical resilience, mental resilience, and spiritual resilience. And by spiritual, what I personally mean is never losing faith. Faith in myself, faith in my dream, even if I was on my knees. I always believed. It's about getting up and failing. My story is about getting up and failing again. And it's about getting up and failing yet again. And then again, but finally succeeding and doing this over and over and over again. It's about putting one foot in front of the other and repeating. Please be aware that what I'm about to tell you is not exaggerated. It's just a summary of how it was. So it started in 2004 when I saw the Little Chef ad, which was for sale freehold. And by the 1st of February 2005, so very quickly, I bought it along with my husband, who had been such a believer in me and my abilities that he'd immediately asked, can I be a 50-50 shareholder? And after a nanosecond's consideration, I enthusiastically agreed. Steve, my husband, was Scottish. My parents lived in Scotland, and we had a holiday chalet about 20 miles from where this cafe, this derelict Little Chef, was. So it was, you know, it made sense in some ways. We put together a basic business plan. Actually, we didn't realise how basic it was at the time, and importantly, how much was missing. We took it to the bank to borrow 150,000, and Steve and I put in the rest, which brought our initial investment to 400,000. Looking back, we made our first significant mistakes before we'd even opened the doors, and that was to get carried away with our enthusiasm. We didn't do our homework thoroughly enough and overlooked some fundamentals, such as massively underestimating the impact of seasonality. And furthermore, we overlooked the absolute necessity for staff accommodation, as we're completely in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, we got the keys and set about doing a rudimentary refurbishment because we knew we had to get opened as quickly as possible to make the most of the forthcoming summer season. And we actually opened on the 25th of April 2005. We were very lucky with certain things when we just opened, such as Poland had joined the EU at around the time that we opened. And as no one locally had applied to any of our job ads, we were able to hire 5 excellent Polish people to form part of our opening team. And alongside, when they worked alongside Steve and myself, we then had the problem of where would they stay. And again, we were lucky that a local caravan park agreed to rent us 2 vans for the season. And that was our staff accommodation sorted, for the short term anyway. I set about sourcing suitable suppliers and setting up accounts. This is something that will resonate particularly with, you know, you ladies today in wholesale. We needed credit accounts to help finance the business. And I made it a policy not to do business with anyone that wouldn't give us a line of credit from the get-go. Controversial perhaps, but I can still remember the conversations as various salesmen looked at me with incredulity as I stood in a building site in the middle of nowhere with my cut glass English accent, having never served fish and chips in my life, Gucci handbag over my shoulder, making the demand of them for a credit account if they were going to do business with us. Actually, somehow I managed to convince them to agree, and they're still our suppliers today. We place a high tariff on supplier loyalty. Suppliers are part of the team and they will help make or break the business. In the early days, we flew by the seats of our pants, learning on the job, and we were super eager to get it right, change and adapt quickly so that customers would enjoy their experience. I worked every day, all day, for the best part of 9 years. I almost never left the place in the early years. I made it part of my job to make a positive improvement to the cafe or the menu every day, as well as meeting, greeting, cooking and cleaning. I knew instinctively and from past experience that word of mouth was critical to success. I also knew that marketing was crucial, but we didn't have any budget left, having spent everything we had in reserve on acquiring a staff house. So we entered the Radio 4 Food and Farming programme Food Awards because they were free to enter and because I loved the show. In November 2005, Steve and I travelled to Birmingham to collect the Winners' Award for the best takeaway in the UK, so just 6 months after opening. As a result of this, the food doyen Sheila Dillon visited the cafe to interview us about what we were doing and what we were trying to create. Over 6 million people heard that interview, many of them were foodies, so we were on the map. We started our second season in 2006 full of enthusiasm. We knew we had the concept broadly right, and our strategy of seeking to serve affordable, great quality, locally sourced and homemade fast food was popular with the public. 15 years ago, you could eat well in Scotland, but it was usually very expensive to do so. We wanted to try and change that and make our food and pricing far more accessible. We catered for people with weird food intolerances. Apologies to anyone who's celiac, but I'm talking 15 years ago. So like celiac disease, something practically no one had heard of back then. We liked our eclectic and diverse customer base, who were taking part in all manner of outdoor pursuits and came from all corners of the world. It felt like we were headed in the right direction. However, in May that year, Steve, my husband, died very suddenly and unexpectedly. He literally dropped dead in front of me at the age of 48 years old of an aortic aneurysm. Nothing at all prepares you for shock and grief of this kind. I lost my husband and business partner in a few seconds. It's only due to a huge amount of support and help from my family and friends that the business didn't go bust, and I was eventually able to come through this. Another of our pre-opening errors had been that we'd admitted to take out any form of life insurance. So I was left with nothing to help ease the financial burden, as well as coping with everything else. The next few years were frankly terrible. I fell out with lots of people I cared about. I was stalked, and the cafe was defaced and vandalised numerous times. I learned that when you're in a bad place, you can end up attracting bad people around you. I got involved in an abusive relationship, and I hired someone that took me to tribunal with the express aim of trying to extract as much money out of me as possible. His tribunal award was a 0 in the end, as the judge could see he had behaved appallingly, but the experience was bruising and very distracting for me. The business limped along. The perception was that it was pretty successful and popular, but the reality was that it made next to no profit, and the lack of trade through the winter hammered the cash flow. I was putting everything I had in to keep it afloat, including an insurance policy I'd been left by Steve, which was meant for his son. And so in my mid-40s, I was borrowing from the bank of mum and dad. Things had to change. I sought support, help and advice from a guy I'd recently met as a potential love interest, but who just happened to be a business coach with a solid background in both large and small businesses. His help and support were transformational. It was crucial to restructure financially, which meant changing banks. This is not a simple process, but we were persistent and it was important, and we eventually achieved it. We extended the hours and opened for breakfast, something I'd always resisted, but Alan built a modest and sensible business case, and now it accounts, or pre-COVID it accounted for 19% of the annual revenue. We started to formalise everything that was in my head, which was a lot, to improve consistency and efficiency. We changed our priorities and focus and by putting business performance and the numbers right up alongside people and the product in terms of importance. In 2014, we built an extension which tripled the number of covers and gave the business a highly visible and attractive facade onto the road for oncoming travellers. Later the same year, my father, who I was very close to, became ill with a degenerative neurological condition. He and mum needed help, and so they moved to my house, which, because it was bought from a disabled person, was very well designed for caring for an invalid. From the onset, my dad made me promise not to put him into a hospital or nursing home, and of course I agreed. However, in truth, I had absolutely no idea what I had signed up to. Dad became very ill, and I simply couldn't get to work. His needs were so severe and demanding that I had to think quickly about who could possibly run my business for me. I turned to Alan, my boyfriend, and asked him if he would sacrifice what he was doing, even on a part-time basis, and take over the running of the company, as I was now a full-time carer. My dad's illness had left him doubly incontinent. He had to be hoisted everywhere, as he could not load bear, and he couldn't speak. He could hear, and he could just about eat if I fed him really slowly, and mentally he was all there. It was without doubt the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, physically and emotionally, and it left me with a very clear realisation that carers are some of the most underrated, underpaid and overlooked people in the workforce today. And as everyone here knows, the vast majority of their carers are women. There was no real support for me being a carer in my own home from the state until long after Dad had died, and only then after I wrote to the chief executive of the council. The lack of support is an issue I'll pick up on when I talk about trying to help keep more women in the workplace, as many women leave either to care for children or their elderly or sick relatives. I'm not making any judgments on this, it's just very often how it is. Whilst I was off and distracted with my dad, I later discovered on my return to work after his death that our bookkeeper had stolen a significant six-figure sum of money from the business, the largest amount being taken during the period that my dad was most poorly. It almost bankrupted the business and practically broke me. I wanted to give up. I felt so betrayed and so utterly stupid. It has to have been the lowest point of my entire career. She did eventually serve a prison sentence for her crimes, as it also emerged that she'd stolen from other clients, as well as she'd stolen from other clients as well, but it was, to be honest, cold comfort from my point of view, too little, too late. I had to work very hard to let this go, and only managed to let it go in the end for the sake of those around me and for the good of the business. We set about trying to save the company and putting a recovery plan in place. I asked Alan if he would run the business as managing director, as I was worn out and worn down, and I still needed to help Mum find her feet and recover from the ordeal of my dad, followed by the theft. It has taken time and been another huge challenge, almost on another level, for me to work for Alan in my business. Although it's been the right thing to do from a personal point of view and from a business point of view, because we have different strengths. Alan is actually also now my husband, because I proposed to him on the 29th of February 2016, which was a leap year day, and I did it at the Gleneagles Hotel in Style. The past few years have seen us all dig in and work very hard on building systems and putting processes in place to improve standards and create efficiencies. We have continued to invest in enhancing the facilities both front and back of house and to develop our team's skills and confidence. Although we didn't expect it, this work has served us well during dealing with the calamity that is COVID. Alan and I are in the process of setting a vision for the future growth of the business, even now, under the leadership of the next generation, and plan what to do with what we want our legacy to look like. It's safe to say that COVID is making us reshape this somewhat, but we are confident of getting through, having learned a lot that will make us stronger in the future, albeit at a cost financially and emotionally. So that's really a summary of my story. It's about making mistakes and trying to learn from them and not making the same mistakes again. It's about asking for help early, not leaving it too long. And in my experience, women tend to be far better at this than a lot of men. And finding the right people or networks to help support you. This is why things like this are great. It's about having a plan, but changing it when you need to. It's about doing stuff and focusing on the things that you don't want to do and don't want to focus on. It's about never losing faith, never. No matter how hard the going gets, and believing in yourself and your ability. This is something that is being really tested right now for me and for us. It's about figuring out your exit plan and handing over the baton before you get past your sell-by date. And I guess it's about living life and giving to life, and it will give back to you. So do I feel enough now? Yeah, well, I think I do. I can't kind of finish just without picking up on the theme of women in the workplace. And I'm making the assumption that if you're tuned in to this event, then you're probably a woman in the workplace influencer. And as such, we're in a tiny minority statistically. COVID has not helped the majority of women, whilst for some, it's been an advantage through the ability to now work more from home. For many others, about 4.5 million, I believe, they have become unpaid carers who are now looking after elderly or poorly relatives who have lost, people that have lost their remaining independence due to lockdown number 1. There are also many women who have found trying to work from home and homeschool just too much of a challenge. Then there are women who can't work from home and homeschool. They can't work from home because they're lowly paid hourly manual workers and they've got to turn up at the production line, or, you know, or the shop. And then finally, there's women who are turning up at the women's refuges. And I understand that they're reporting demand up ×4 due to an explosion in domestic violence. Obviously, these women are unable to work due to distress and disruption. It's therefore incumbent upon all of us to use our positions and influence to do what we can to change the situation. And, you know, that's a theme that's already been picked up, obviously, by the previous speakers very well. Personally, we try to educate our workforce, both men and women, to have the knowledge and skills and confidence to manage capably and fairly. This is really important, because if we're going to make any improvements in the statistics, we need to have great quality and well-informed management. Does your team, you know, especially if you're working in a smaller company, does your team have a top 5 reasons for improving diversity in the workplace? Have they considered and discussed this? As opposed to just paying lip service to it or doing it because it ticks a box. Put the relevant policies, we have put the relevant policies in place to help guide our team rather than leaving them to figure stuff out in a vacuum. We've tried to seek to create a culture where respect is at the heart of the organisation. Everything we do, say, print and produce. In other words, it's about more than just gender diversity. We've included unconscious bias and traditional bias in management training. So at the very least, there's a basic understanding of these topics. We work with our trade associations, networking groups, MPs, and other organisations for greater support and recognition for carers. This is not only the right thing to do for this underrated group, but it could help many thousands of women back into the workplace more quickly, or mean actually that they never leave in the first place. Finally, we should be the best role models that we can possibly be, providing vital inspiration to other women. Let's try and make a fantastic job of this. And it was lovely to hear initially Kelly saying that she said she'd had a fantastic boss. That's what we should be, fantastic bosses, if we possibly can be. So that's about it. I'll wrap up. I hope I haven't bored or rambled on for too long. And if you've got any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you. Thank you.
Goodness me, Sarah, honestly, what a roller coaster. I have just been sitting here making a few notes, but just so absorbed in your story. I think that you absolutely have confirmed that you are a true outstanding role model for all of us. And your story of resilience and never losing faith in yourself and getting up and getting up and getting up and getting up again. Oh my goodness. Really quite outstanding. Thank you so much for the honesty and openness that you shared. Is really totally inspirational.